Penn State Wrestling goes 2-0 in the state of Michigan. They defeat Michigan 27-9 and Michigan State 35-0. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Greg Pickel, our wrestling reporter, here to talk about the Nittany Lions as they march through the Big Ten dual season. So, Greg, a big weekend, kind of played out exactly how you expected from what I understand. So, what were the highlights to you, and what are the things you take out of last weekend's win throughout the tour of the state of Michigan?
Yeah, so a couple things, T. Frank. Obviously, Penn State went into both of these matches favored to win over Michigan, which was ranked. Depending on where you look, they were inside some outlets' top 5. They were a top 15 team according to the NWCA coaches poll. A very talented group that is going to send wrestlers to the All-American level at nationals. They'll maybe have a Big Ten champ or two, and they will be competitive at NCAAs. But no real match for Penn State on this night in Ann Arbor. Looking back at last Friday, Penn State went in, pretty much dominated throughout that match. They started things off with a bang with Levi Haynes in a very tight match, winning 2-1, and kind of rolled from there. But two real, I guess, before we get into the wrestlers that weren't on the mat, let's talk about two who were. The first one is Braden Davis. Penn State officially pulling his red shirt now. In his freshman season, 4-time Michigan State champ, went back to his home state and looked really good. He upset, I guess you could call it an upset based on the rankings that just came out this week. It really wasn't. And if he had more matches and you know, if we're looking and trying to project past upsets based on NCAA seedings, this one probably won't be viewed as one down the road. But he beats then number 5, Michael D'Agostino, pretty handily, 5-1. Match maybe a little bit closer than it looked. He scored late to make the difference there. And then on Sunday, he beats Tristan Luan 7-3. So Braden Davis is rolling at 125. And it was also a big weekend for Mithcel Mesenbrink, another first-year Lion who's wrestling at 165 pounds. He is moving up the rankings now inside the top 10. He beat Cameron Amin, number 7 of Michigan, pretty handily, 12-1 major decision, and he pushed the pace throughout that match. He could have got Cameron Amin to stall out. If you get so many stalling cautions, you can actually forfeit the match, and I think it was not out of the question that could have taken place. So that was a good win for him. Then he goes and beats Caleb Fish, a very good wrestler at Michigan State, 18-9 by major decision on Sunday. So 2 first-year Nittany Lions, T. Frank, really on the ball this past weekend, really helping power Penn State. And, you know, I don't want to say those 2 weight classes, 125 and 165, were enormous question marks coming into the year. 25 certainly was, 65 maybe not as much. But these 2 guys have made really all that conversation an afterthought. Mesenbrink and Braden Davis both look not just like guys who can All-American, but could make noise depending on how things play out to make a run to the NCAA finals based on what we've seen so far. 2 very aggressive point scorers who fit the model Carol Sanderson and his program preaches. So, yeah, impressive weekend for those 2 guys, and it was a part of an impressive weekend overall for the Penn State wrestling team.
Yeah, Mesenbrink was super interesting to listen to on Tuesday when he spoke with the media. A guy that very self-aware, but also not concerned necessarily with those perceptions. It was really interesting to hear him speak and to talk about not just that he is aggressive, but why he's aggressive and why he wants to go out there and score points as a wrestler, and how he thinks kind of his philosophies were on display in that conversation. Are there things that you can take away? As I know you just kind of mentioned that you think he could make more noise than maybe initially expected on the NCAA side, but just how. I guess I'm just interested in your thoughts on Mithcel Mesenbrink and what he brings to the table for Penn State.
Yeah, I mean, one of the really interesting quotes he mentioned that you heard him talk about on Tuesday as we taped this on Wednesday, January 24, is said you like to surround yourself with like-minded people, and I think everybody in this room is like that. And what he's talking about, of course, is being willing to go score points. That is what set Penn State apart for years now, since Carol Sanderson has been here, is the desire to score as many points as possible and not viewing taking a risk as a problem, but an opportunity to get better, whether it works or not. You know, you try and hit a move that may end up with 7 points, or it may end up on your back, but did it work? Did it help you get better for Big Ten? Did it help you get better for the national tournament? That's what they practice and they preach. And a lot of times these Penn State guys are so talented that it works, and it comes with a bonanza of bonus points, both in dual meets and also in the tournament, which has propelled Penn State to team titles, of course. at the individual tournament. So I guess my takeaway from Mesenbrink, T. Frank, is just simply the fact that he fits this program perfectly. Cael Sanderson said 2 weeks ago that if they knew that he was going to be such a killer at the college level, they would have camped out in his front yard for him. He obviously spent a year at Cal Baptist and then comes from the very highly regarded Askren Academy wrestling program in Wisconsin. So he was not an unknown prospect by any stretch of the imagination, but Cael Sanderson, I thought maybe with a little bit revisionist history yesterday, saying he's not sure if this effort so far this year has surprised people. I think it's surprised plenty. Maybe not those that listened to what Penn State thought of him when he got to campus and what they saw from him initially when he arrived in State College. But, we're talking about a guy who, again, very, very highly decorated prep career, but was 2-0 at the college level and kind of was looking for a new opportunity pretty quickly once he got to his first college last year. So I'm just not sure that in general he hasn't raised some eyebrows. But yeah, if you were following along with his journey before he hit the mat for the first time for Penn State, yeah, you're probably not surprised. But just the way he wrestles, the tenaciousness, the aggressiveness is just super impressive. And, for a guy his age, not something we always see.
What's next on your mind for this week?
Yeah, so obviously the big question at this point, and the one that really everyone cares about, is who's going to start at 149 pounds. So Tyler Kasak comes out after Shane Van Ness. If you're not following along with the whole Penn State wrestling season, an All-American last year, returning starter for Penn State this year. He suffered a season-ending injury in December, and so Penn State had to figure out what it was going to do at 149 pounds. The first two duels of 2024, they went with Tyler Kasak. He picked up two top 15 victories. The freshman looked like he was the guy, and they kind of were talking about him like he was going to be the guy. In fact, if you go back and listen to the audio from Cael Sanderson, T. Frank, I think there was less ambiguity about the plan with Tyler Kasak at 149 compared to Braden Davis when those conversations first started, at least in a public space, about a month ago. So then Kasak is one of the Nittany Lions who is dealing with an illness. Cael Sanderson describing it basically as one of those things that kind of knocks you out for a few days and then you're back ready to go. We all know what that's like. So
yeah,
he was not able to wrestle during Penn State's trip to Michigan. Junior David Evans, a very good wrestler in his own right, one of those guys that if he went into the transfer portal, I don't think he'd have any issue finding a place to wrestle as a starter. He wins both matches last weekend. And so the question on Tuesday was, does that give Penn State more to think about? And Cael Sanderson didn't really answer the question directly while also kind of answering it directly and saying that, they've wrestled once, and that was albeit at 141 pounds earlier this year. And Kasak won by tiebreaker decision 2-1 back at the Army Black Knight Invitational in November. So he has that. Obviously they've been wrestling in the room, and we've seen both guys in matches now. To me, the higher upside guy is Kasak in terms of scoring, both in dual matches and at the national tournament. And I do think that ultimately they're going to go that direction, burn his red shirt, and make him the second freshman to start for this team during the 2023-2024 season. But Evans, like I said, a very good wrestler in his own right, certainly gave them something to think about at that weight. And we'll see what happens Sunday at Maryland. That's going to really be the first indicator of where this thing's going to go. And I'm pretty confident that whatever we see on Sunday is going to end up being what we see come the national tournament in a couple months from now.
Maryland coming up on Sunday, which, as you pointed out to me before the start of the show, midway point of the dual season, which is kind of crazy. How do you? What's been the storyline? What are the things that stand out to you so far through the first half of the 2023-2024 season?
Yeah, so obviously the injury that we talked about a moment ago to Shane Van Ness was certainly not something on our radar. You never, of course, are expecting season-ending injuries to pop up. But, the depth for Penn State has really shined through, as we talked about going into last weekend, and then we'll get into a little bit here now. Penn State was without starters at Michigan and at Michigan State. Carter Starachi, the multi-time All-American and national champion, was dealing with an illness, didn't wrestle Friday or Sunday, expected back in the lineup at Maryland. We already talked about Tyler Kasak being out, and Greg Kirkfleet, the heavyweight, did not wrestle on Sunday at Michigan State. Not totally sure why that was the case, but he was available to the media on Tuesday, so we can rightly assume that all was fine and well there. So
he gave zero explanation, really. He just said,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you can probably chalk it up to veteran rest. I mean, we've
Yeah,
seen that
yeah,
more
yeah.
and more across the sport, and especially at Penn State for these older guys. He also did not commit to whether he's going to come back to Penn State for another season in 2024, 2025, which I wouldn't expect him to at this point. That's kind of been the going rate. But yeah, depth shines through. Cale Sanderson in his first news conference back in November was asked about this concept of depth and his roster and things like that. And he kind of said that based on the way things are trending with NIL and this, that, and the other thing, that your better programs are going to end up with more depth. That's just the way it's kind of always been that way, but not necessarily. But it is certainly that way now. And, you see it with this Penn State lineup this year. So that stands out to me. And we'll get into more of our full half season, mid-season superlatives next week. But, again, I think that they brought in 3 transfers. Mesenbrink has clearly been the star of the group, but Aaron Nagao has been very good too, despite the loss he had on Friday night to Dylan Ragusin, who pinned him in sudden victory, kind of caught him. And, I wouldn't read too much into that as it relates to where Aaron Nagao can go this year. But, at this point in time, he's a former All-American who expects to be back there. And Bernie Truax, I think, can say the same thing. He's not a prolific scorer, and I think that's a little bit jarring to Penn State fans who have, like we just talked about, are so used to watching these masterclass, especially in the upper weight, of just go out, especially with the new 3-point takedown rule. You can get 8 and pretty much be done with things by technical fall, depending on if you do it right. So, he is not necessarily, or at least not at this point, the most prolific point scorer, but he's getting the job done pretty quietly. And I think that so they hit on the transfer portal. They have clearly hit on Braden Davis as from a recruiting perspective, and Tyler Kasak as well. And, what's pretty crazy is even Josh Barr, who's a freshman for Penn State, who has gotten some action this year with guys being in and out of the lineup. I think he was probably not, I'm not sure if maybe it would be an All-American if he was asked to wrestle this year at 184 pounds. But I certainly think that he would make some noise at the national tournament. So another very good freshman class for Penn State, kind of par for the course. Good, transfer portal class, and good ability to keep their lineup together and their reserves at the school instead of the transfer portal has equaled a good start.
So last thing, Maryland coming up this weekend. What do you want? What are you interested in, and what are you looking at this weekend as far as a preview of the upcoming dual meet?
Yeah, so an interesting match. Maryland has a handful of ranked guys, but only one top 5 bout is on our match sheet at this point. We're looking at Aaron Brooks, a top-ranked wrestler in the country, multi-time national champ. At 184 pounds, he, of course, bumped up to 197. He's going to wrestle Jackson Smith, who's ranked 5th right now by Intermat, the Maryland sophomore. Pretty good start to the year. He's 12-2, so that is the headliner bout of the weekend for Penn State. Only one dual match this weekend. It is Maryland, as you mentioned, T. Frank, noon on Sunday. Big Ten Network televising it from College Park. Former Nittany Lion in the Maryland lineup, too. Seth Nevels is going to wrestle for the Terrapins at heavyweight, so we'd expect him to battle Greg Kirkfleet. Seth Nevels is a guy who, I think most Penn State fans, when he went into the portal, understood that, what reason he had to do that, and obviously Greg Kirkfleet being in front of him was the reason. So he's a grad transfer down to Maryland and is trying to make some noise there. 10-6 on the year, so there is that Penn State connection in the Terps lineup. But otherwise, I think the match that'll have probably again is back to 149. Ethan Miller, sophomore there at Maryland, 10-5 on the year. He's ranked 14th by Intermat. Like I said, we would expect Kasak back in the lineup. Intermat ranks him at number 12 going into this week. So, another close match there possible in terms of where those guys are ranked. So another Penn State win on the horizon. I don't think there's any question. If there were betting odds on this, they would be an enormous favorite, but still some interesting storylines to follow. And of course, we'll cover them all here on Blue White Illustrated, the YouTube channel, and wherever else you get your audio, and also bluewhiteillustrated.com.
Yeah, the response to the wrestling show so far has been awesome. We've been doing this pretty much just as an exclusive content at bluewhiteillustrated.com, but check this out on wherever you do podcasts and, of course, on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Greg Pickel giving you the information about what you need to know for Penn State wrestling. Greg, thanks so much. We will be back next week to preview the midway point of the season. Greg wants to do some superlatives, so look out for that coming up next week on the Penn State Wrestling Show.